Let me turn my jazz down that I've got in the background. Um, Hello, it has been a minute. I was going to post a quote, and then the caption for it started to read like an essay, and I thought maybe I should just say this instead. And since it's been months since I've recorded a video, and some of you have been harassing me um, either on YouTube or in person, we'll get this out the way. So, what I was going to say, and something that's been coming up for almost all my clients, has been this concept of model the mess. And it's something that I said Friday that I've really been sitting with, model the mess. And that bears some explaining. Most of my larger projects this year are collectives and collective impact, as they should be. And um, within those, what's been happening is that almost all of them, not all of them, but most of them do not bear any resemblance to what we scoped out. And for some of my clients, it's been incredibly painful. There's been a lot of shift, there's been a lot of shedding, there's been a lot of struggle, and challenges and things that have come up. And if we're not careful, what can happen is as we get into this messiness, right, of things not looking the way that we've expected it, as we've planned out, as we have in the project plan, it can elicit shame, it can elicit guilt, and it can have folks thinking that they're going in the wrong direction, that things are falling apart. And maybe they are getting deconstructed, but we've got to deconstruct to rebuild, right? And so what I said on the phone was, yeah, we've got to model the mess as we are unlearning and relearning. We've got to model that it is okay to have things, quote unquote, fall apart, that it's okay for things not to add up. And that this is naturally what's going to happen when you're moving away from a very power dominating model, when you're moving away from a hierarchical model, when you're bringing in a number of different people with lived experiences and perspectives and hopes and dreams and aspirations and visions and missions. It's inherent that it's gonna get really messy. And one of the things that's really sitting with me recently is understanding how pernicious, ooh, that's a big word, how pernicious, your word for the day, how pernicious white supremacy is as we're doing this work. Because oftentimes the concern with mess is not the mess, it's the fact that there isn't the perfectionism that supremacy would tell us that we need to have, that everyone's not in line, that things aren't nice and neat and pretty. That is really coming up. And so I actually, especially last week, had to really sit in modeling the mess. As many of you know, when I emailed you and said, I need to reschedule. Yeah, I'm in it. So I understand this too. And there's some things that I've been thinking about for myself and that I have been reminding and telling clients that I thought that I might share that might be helpful for some of y'all. So one is trail markers. I've talked about trail markers quite a bit in some of my other projects and talks, but think about when you've gone hiking and you don't see a trail marker for 30, 40, 45 minutes and you're thinking, oh my gosh, this is how I'm going to die. This is how it ends. Maybe you don't go there, I go there. But you definitely get really anxious and nervous. Did I miss something? What happened along the way? And so what can be really important is to have some sort of trail marker that tells people where they are, how far they've gone, how far, where is the next stop, where. I mean, all of that, having some type of indication is what allows us to kind of ease and trust the process, because we're not in a complete, I don't want to say disarray, but we're not completely off guard. We're not completely like, well, I don't know what's going on. And so building some type of trail markers into the work that you're doing, whether it be a collective, whether it be you starting a business, whether it be a program that you're starting in the community, but creating some trail markers so that people have some indication of where they are in the process, and not where they are, again, from a perfectionism sense of, we said we'd be here and we're here, but in the sense of, this is what we're intending to do. This is what we're responding to. This is what's coming up. All of that are trail markers, and they're super important. Acknowledge that we are whole beings, as the body keeps score and some of the other Science has told us we feel before we know, many seconds before we know. And so oftentimes what we see manifesting in mess when there's conflict and people aren't getting along and things aren't feeling as honeymoony as they once felt is stuff that's coming up with the body, right? There's fear responses that are coming up. There's internalized oppression. There's internalized trauma. There's all kinds of things that live in our body that we're responding to, whether we're conscious of it or not. And so, as we're doing our work, we've got to be thinking about how are we tending to and taking care of the body, so that as it has a very visceral response to something, we're acknowledging and taking care of that, so that people can then register in their minds what's happening, and then helping them. What just came up for you? Where did you feel it? When have you felt that before? It's something I'm actually working with a lot of clients on that I'm super excited about, is intentionally having portions and integrating concepts of somatics into the work, understanding that oftentimes what's coming up is stuff that's in people's bodies and not necessarily in their minds. Change the destination. How are you defining success? What are you measuring? What are your metrics? Oftentimes our metrics are what creates the shame. So if our metrics is we've got to be from here to here in 3 months, and that's just it, and if we're not here to here in 3 months, and this was a failure, well, that's going to set you up for some problems, right? Are you integrating metrics and measures that encourage the thing that we're trying to do? For example, unlearning. What did I unlearn this week? How have I shown up differently this week? What is one uncomfortable thing that I sat in this week? What is one way that we're shifting how we navigate? So are you coming up with metrics that actually encourage people to embrace might be a strong word, to navigate the mess, but also to allow the mess to happen? Or are you creating metrics that make people skirt over the mess because they're like, oh, no, we don't have time to, the community isn't responding the way that we wanted them to respond, but we said we had to have this in 3 months, and so we're pushing through. That's going to create some problems, right? Timelines is another biggie. That's a whole treatise unto itself. Check your timelines, because timelines often are creating a lot of mess. Build in intentional reflection and interrogation and imagination. So I think of this as a tether. If you have some type of tether to folks, they feel comfortable going deeper because they know they can be pulled back. So I will feel more comfortable. I'm not going to say I'm going to feel comfortable, because none of this is about comfort per se, but I will feel more comfortable diving into the mess if I know I can be pulled back, if I know there's going to be intentional time for reflection, if I'm being asked questions, if I'm thinking about it, if I'm not allowed to just sit and kind of ruminate in it. I know for me, I'm a ruminator. So, if you have someone that once something happens that induces shame, it can just kind of become a shame spiral. We don't want that, but we want to have really intentional and helpful ways of asking questions. And we also want to make sure that as we're unlearning and we're bumping heads and we're not getting along, that we have frameworks like the Truth, Healing, and Reconciliation framework that redress those harms. We want to try to do no harm, but where we do have some harm that takes place, or people's feelings are hurt, toes are stepped on, we want to have some intentional process for redressing that. That's how you build trust. And allowing for messiness, to allow that to happen, trust is key. And then, so this has become a treatise. The last thing, have a ritual of grace. Is that an affirmation? Is it, again, celebrating at the end of the day something uncomfortable that you set in, something that you relearned, or unlearning, a new way that you're showing up. I've been looking at a lot around rituals, particularly, funerary rituals. That's a whole different conversation. But I've been looking at rituals to create grace, because the fact of the matter is, when we are unlearning, when we are learning new ways of being, it is going to be uncomfortable. It's going to ache. It's going to hurt. There's going to be conflict, and there will be mess. If there is not mess, we are not relearning. We're not unlearning and relearning. And so as that is happening, how are we showing up for ourselves, and how are we being compassionate to ourselves so that we can then be compassionate and show up for others, is a really big thing that I'm looking at. So model the mess. As people are not getting along, as things come up, as timelines fall by the wayside, as things start to discombobulate, don't rush to fix. Don't rush to wipe away. Don't rush to overcome. Don't rush to crush, or whatever the long, whatever that Tim Ferriss like language is. Just kind of take a step back and see how can we model that this is okay, and we can navigate our ways out of this in a generative and transformative way. We're in retrograde, so my thoughts will be with you all, and similarly be thinking of me. All right.